Gamers, we've lost. Murcielago still sucks. I have some background footage that I've recorded so you can watch, but generally it seems that it's going to be outperformed by Rising Force, just with the very basic charge attack comp that doesn't require cats to come out to the front. And even in the best of circumstances, it's mostly competitive. So I wanted to talk about why Murcielago is bad. Because unlike most of the other Illustrious weapons, it has a bunch of things, a bunch of the mechanics of the game that work against it. So let's first start off with which classes you can use with Murcielago. Bow classes suck. You have Kengo, which is about the only viable option. And then you have Nighthound and Robin Hood. Nighthound is a class that doesn't want to stay out in the front, and let's be real, nobody wants to use Robin Hood if they can help it. The old version of Murcielago seemed to... it had a bit of synergy with Robin Hood, but even then, there was no real point. So you're basically left with Kengo. And Kengo also still kind of sucks. Kanashige has been carrying Kengo for like the last... ever since Kengo came out. Like, it's absolutely absurd. Kengo as a class offers very little. Offers a couple of buffs on chain bursts that don't really matter, and a triple strike. And that's about it. On the other hand, Rising Force, every time you charge attack, you get that bonus nuke. And it doesn't seem like much, but it really adds up very fast. And you'll see that especially in this first fight that I recorded. It's against Yggdrasil, Magna 3, and this is a fight where there is a hard cap, the lower hard cap, which means that all the CA specs that Murcielago is giving your team are mostly wasted. And then, on the other hand, Rising Force, which gets that bonus nuke, obviously that's a new source of damage, which means it's not as affected by the hard cap. So yeah, you'll find the Rising Force outpaces the Kengo in the race to 40%. Another downside, although Murcielago does give your team charge bar, charge attack reactivation is a really strange and messed up mechanic. So I posted a video about this before, but essentially the reactivation of the charge attack will still eat your bar, which is not ideal for Murcielago because it will give you bar between the charge attacks. So let's say you charge attack, the damage from the charge attack gives you the bar because you drained, and then your reactivation will again eat that bar, so it's like it never existed in the first place. And that's a problem when all of Wind's best characters have CA reactivation, right? I mean, even in this team, right? Katura, Mirin, Raph, they all have it, and then there's also characters like Summer Eustace, Kaguya, Charlotta, like everybody in Wind who is a CA character has CA reactivation, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work with Murcielago. You just lose that bar, which is half the reason you would want to use the weapon. There's also another problem with it, where Murcielago doesn't work like Kanashige. And your immediate thought when you look at Murcielago is, oh, it's bow Kanashige. But it's not. Because the thing is that Kanashige gives your team charge bar when the MC Ogies, but Murcielago gives it to you after the Ogi, and that's a really important difference. Because what happens is, for example, when you're using a Kanashige, and you're at 190% bar, your first charge attack will bring you down 100, but then you gain bar to now be above 100, and then your MC will immediately charge attack again. Murcielago doesn't work like that. You need to have the full 200% bar, or you won't get a double CA. Which is kind of baffling, because Kengo is the only class this weapon works on. There's so many downsides. Thankfully, Andromeda does not suffer a lot of those downsides, so its rebalance has probably been more effective, although that was a better weapon before the rebalances anyway. But let's talk about the upsides. One of the main upsides, and this is gonna sound really dumb, Murcielago does come with a big glory, and genuinely, that is an upside. Probably one of the best things about the weapon, considering you have to drop Rising Force, is that you're grid stronger compared to that Proving Grounds harp, which is terrible in comparison. There is also the fact that you do a lot of charge attack damage. Obviously, CA specs of the whole team is great, and in the dummy trial, the MC was hitting for crazy CA numbers, but even then, you're losing all the bar from the CA reactivation bug. Your MC will less consistently double charge attack compared to a Kanashige. You're losing everything that comes from being Rising Force. It's really tough. Maybe there's some secret sauce setup that helps you, I don't know, insta-kill Hexa or some dumb shit. I imagine it's a good weapon for solos. I use Murcielago for my sub solo, even though, that was mostly to prove that I could do that, but Wind's sub solo is really easy. Maybe there's use for it in HL, where the hard cap is a lot higher. But obviously, you do not want to spend 150 moons on a weapon that might be good in HL, especially when you're doing Wind HL, which it's so easy to do Wind HL. Wind is basically the easiest element to do any hard content on. Maybe water beats it out, but Wind is real easy. And that means that Wind can usually, run some more damage heavy like MC classes, like Chrysor, or, Rising Force. It's just a big disappointment, to be frank. Although, I don't know. Don't get the weapon. Rhom got giga buffed. I'm gonna get Rhom, but don't get Murcielago. I'm recording this a little bit after buying and then testing Rhom Fire. It seems that overall the weapon is actually an upgrade compared to the side grade that it was, when it came to trying to compete against Manadiver. I've got test footage in the background. Obviously I should have turned CA off for Rhom Fire and Manadiver. And you could argue that Galleon would have been better as long as I manualed the first turn for Manadiver, but whatever. The point is that it actually competes and beats Manadiver, which it should if it's gonna cost you 150 moons. Full turn assassins are very strong, and obviously it's very nice to be able to have the ability to spam it. Especially when every second application goes to your team. As for how practical this will be outside of mashing, I don't really see it. A lot of spear classes are either very defensive or like Apsaras, where they're essentially entirely passives and their skills suck. Obviously, Beguiling Dance from Apsaras seems to be designed to work with Rhom, but Beguiling Dance is just too difficult to maintain in Modern Granblue without something like a Halloween Mugen substitute, so I wouldn't really expect to see it out of, those sickos who race in endgame raids. It couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. Just to finish off the video, I wanted to update the tier list for the Illustrious weapons that I threw up in another video at some point. Obviously the meta's changed since then, and we have these rebalances, which, although we're still in the initial phases of testing, we've definitely had time to play around with these for a decent amount of time. So I'm just going to start from the top. I'm going to move fronting up. The difference between playing Earth with and without fronting is absurd. Fronting has just got more support, and yeah, I cannot imagine going back to playing without fronting, even as a Magna player. It is truly both a blessing and a curse to be an Earth player. Moving down to solid tier, in my opinion, Ura is going to come up and Higurashi is going to come down. Ura's only gotten better, mainly thanks to the addition of Sumo. It's Light's premier bursting weapon, and although it's not as good as, Water Gun or Resh, it's still really solid. If you're Primal Light, you probably want one. Because the other alternative is going Relic Buster Florence, and that is not fun. It's way too clicky. As for Shishio, Shishio's just always been a weapon for soloing, but Water doesn't need it for endgame. So if you're really into just having a full auto that's never gonna die or soloing, it's a good weapon. It's the best in class weapon for that. But for more general use, you're not gonna really see it too much. Higurashi. Higurashi's fallen down because Fire's gotten better. The main reason you'd run Higurashi is because endgame Fire really sucked. But, with the addition of Noah and with Fenny, it's gone in so much easier. Plus, it's competing with Fenny Staff, which is an absurd weapon that does, insane damage, and it heals the team, and it really fits into Fire's normal attack / skill meta. While Higurashi is very charge attack focused, and well, fire doesn't really do charge attacks that much. There are some characters, but it's not really fire's thing. And I'm going to move up to solid Zosimos and Rhom. Zosimos, it's kind of like Penny Torch, where it does a shit ton of damage, and more importantly, it makes your Manadiver more Manadiver, because why not at this point? Just double Manadiver. Screw it. Its charge attack is also really solid, so if you accidentally charge attack at any point, you're not really feeling the hurt from like losing a bunch of damage on that turn. Rhom Fire, we've talked about this earlier. It's a great mashing weapon, but spear classes kind of suck. It would be higher on solid if it had better classes to be paired with. But unfortunately, even though it gives team-wide full turn assassin, which is crazy, it's still a spear, and that really holds it back. Moving down to these next tiers, so Andromeda has the issue of front being the more supported option, and Andromeda, obviously there are CA units in Earth, right, but their use is very limited, and the main reason for that is that a lot of them don't have ways to bypass the hard damage cap. For example, Octo only does CA damage. Satyr basically like does a little bit of skill, but mainly CA. Monica, all CA. And Alexiel, mostly CA. And the problem is, once you reach that hard cap, the only way to do more damage is to, you know, pair your charge attacks with like an auto skill nuke that happens every time you charge attack, or like nuke on Fated Chain, things like that. But Earth doesn't have that too much, so although Andromeda is a really solid weapon, the amount of times where it can be used at its full potential is very limited to Nightmare 250 and HL content. And, you know, for HL content, Grunting does fine. So, it's basically a Guild War weapon. And 150 moons for Guild War placement, whether that's worth it or not is up to you. Futsu is kind of similar to Zosimos, but just worse. Thunderstruck, there's not much support for it, so actually getting to full Thunderstruck is... I mean, not even full, to half Thunderstruck. It's kind of difficult. Obviously that could change, and if that does change, it will get higher. It also has the disadvantage of not having a very good charge attack for damage. Skill cut is very good, but the best dagger class is Manadiver, which doesn't care that much about skill cut. It would rather just keep mashing with its normal attacks. So there is potential with Futsu if you're running something like maybe on Myoji, but that's going towards endgame, and honestly, Light's endgame is perfectly fine. You don't need a Futsu. So it's kind of ends up becoming like a solo-only weapon, which it's much worse than Shishio at doing that. Blazing Mistral is kind of sad. I mean, it does good damage, but it's very clicky. And more importantly, you use a spear, and spears really suck. At least Rhom Fire has Apsaras, which have good passives, but there isn't really like a skill nuke CA spear class. There's just a big ball of disappointment, and the weapon is very clicky, so it's not a very good mash weapon. Obviously, compared to Higurashi, it's not going to compete in endgame, and certainly not a burst weapon. So, just get a Fenny staff. Just get Phoenix Torch, and yeah, Murcielago is hot dog water. Don't buy it. I bought it because I thought it was funny. Don't buy it. I barely use this. I used it in Hexa to handicap myself, so I don't do too much damage. And now that they buffed it, maybe that doesn't even work anymore. I'm sure it's fine. I have theater in that comp, so baby time. But trust me, it's not worth the mints.